Standing in the cargo hold of that ship was kind of eerie. As the doors opened, and I saw several robots come through. Now, they weren't walking robots or anything like that. They simply rolled across the floor, about knee high in height, and they came up to me and then began to circle around, seemingly to check me out. As they did this, a feline ish type creature was standing in the doorway, just kind of staring at me. Don't want to say it looked like a cougar or a tiger or anything like that. But it did look what you would think an anthropomorphized cat would look like. However, it did not have the light brown of a cougar or anything like that. It was more of a almost pale, pretty close to my skin complexion actually, which was kind of weird. However, it did have a certain type of stripe, but these stripes were not straight. They kind of serpentined like snakes as they went down his face and down his neck, passed into where what could be considered clothing covered up, and didn't cover up all that much. I had noticed that very few alien species actually seem to wear a lot of clothing. I guess that's more of a human thing than anything else. Regardless of this, once the drones gave a certain beep, then they seemed to clear that thing for something. It walked over. I didn't know if it was male or female. It stood roughly about chin height to me at the top of its head. Looked me up and down. "Well, you don't look like much. I don't know why they paid so much for you." It turned and looked at the tentacle creature that walked me in. You're done. Go away." And it just turned and left. No comments at all. The cat creature then turned back to me. "So you're that healer gladiator guy they talk about?" The what?" I asked him. "The healer gladiator. It's all over the news and all the entertainment channels. Even after you guys beat the crap out of those creatures, you went and healed the rest of them." Well, I wasn't the only one who did a little patching up work. "Patching up?" Basic first aid." "The hell is first aid?" Whatever. I did the basic healing." "Ah, yeah. Yeah, we saw that, but you seem to have techniques that were either lost or nobody ever uses anymore. And because of that, they figured you might be useful, I guess. So, yeah." Okay. I didn't quite understand what the hell was going on. I began to look around the cargo bay. I figured he was going to tell me to go to work. "Well, you're done here, so let's just follow me. I'll show you where you're going to be working." And he just turned around and walked, and I figured, what the hell? I just followed him along. Eventually, we went down a few corridors as I began to look at the layout of this ship. It was surprisingly similar to the one that I had seen before. It's like something was standardized across the board, and I couldn't figure out exactly what exactly it was. But eventually, we came up to a couple of doors. He opened them up, we walked inside, and I was amazed. Inside looked like some sort of sick bay or aid station or something. "So here's where you're going to work, and you're going to be learning all sorts of healing, because now that humans are here, we need somebody who knows how to deal with them, and you're perfect for that." Well, I'm not a doc, but sure." "A doc? What the hell's a doc?" I'm never mind. "Well, hold on. Where's your... Hey, where the hell is she? Oh, son of a... Oh, damn, she's not... Hold on. You just stay here. I gotta go find your teacher. Hold on. Where the hell did she go, you bitch? He mumbled to himself as he eventually left the door. I could hear him walking down. Surprisingly, the door didn't shut behind him, unlike those Trek shows that people watch back home. But I could hear him... "There you are! What the hell? You should have been in the medical bay. Come on, goddamn, get in there. He's already there. Go and introduce yourself." As I stood there looking at the door, in walked another lizard-type person-ish thing, standing just about as tall as the cat one. Seems like humans are a little big for, I don't know, galactic standard, I guess. It came in dressed head to toe in robes, several robes, to the point where I could barely see its clawed hand. I could see its face, but it seemed to be of a different reptilian species than the one I just came from before. This one's face did not stick out like a kimono dragon or anything like that. It was much more, shall we say, stubby, and almost had human-ish kind of features, although it was pretty clear that it still had some fangs. Definitely had the reptilian eyes and, of course, scales. As it walked, it almost seemed to glide as it walked. It didn't bob its head like you would think a lizard of that size would be. However, I could tell by the way it walked, it wasn't as janky as you could say us humans do. But I could also see a tail behind, swaying underneath all those robes. It walked up. So, you are the one I teach. It looked me up and down. You do not look fearsome. They told me it was a gladiator was coming that I was going to teach. But you look, I believe the word you're looking for is squishy. Yes, squishy, squishy. Yes. Squishy works. You humans do look very squishy. However, I did see on the vid that you are very strong, and that's a good thing. As we are underway, many times our personnel get damaged and they need to be carried here. We need someone as strong as you to bring them here, but we also need you to tend to their wounds. And from what I'm told, you are able to tend wounds already. Yeah, I know basic first aid. First aid? Oh, I swear, nobody knows what that means. Yeah, I know basic healing techniques. Ah, good. That is good, because this will be a very long trip, and you need to learn as much as possible. Because if you don't, you will immediately get sold to ones who are not as kind as we are. Yeah, I kind of figured that one. She then turned, and yes, I found out it was a she, and went to the first console and began my first lesson. While we were doing so, I began to study as much as I could. I would need to know as much about this alien tech as I possibly could to try and figure out how to get my ass back home. For the next several weeks, the ship was either docked in a space station or en route, and the only place I was either my closet of a room, which was simply just down the hall, maybe 3 steps, and then across the hall from the aid station, or in the aid station itself. The only break I ever had was when I finally asked them, "Hey, do you have a place I can wash up? I can even smell myself, and I stink." "Oh, that's not your normal aroma. I thought you all smelled that pungent." "No, we don't. Is there a shower, a bath, something I can clean up with?" "So you don't simply just shed your skin or lick yourself clean?" I had to joke and say, "Look, if I could lick myself clean, I'd never leave my room." She looked at me sideways on that. I figured that type of humor would just go straight over her head, which it did. Eventually, they did show me not only the galley, which thankfully they had some sort of food that didn't taste like, well, crap, and they showed me where I could wash up, and oh, a hot shower felt good. Holy crap, I'm just standing there just, thank you. Oh, crap, this feels nice. Surprisingly, it's a mixed type bathing area. The only reason I know this is because as I was taking a shower, just as I turned around so I could spray my face with the water, I looked over, and there's the doc taking off her robes, and she ain't wearing nothing under those things. All I could think is, what is she, French? What the hell? Then, of course, I examined her body a little bit, and I realized, wait a minute, how come she's got curves that point in? Why... Huh? I would have to look this up later. And what I found out was very interesting, since I was in the medical sector and had to know about every different species. Though looking at them, it's very difficult for us humans to tell which ones are male, which ones are female. It is very easy to tell if a female gives birth via eggs or live offspring. Almost every single time it's live offspring, they have to nurse, which requires, as you know, something to nurse from. So it is what it is. As it turns out, her species of lizard actually gives birth to live children. I found out that the other species, the original mistress, she actually craps out eggs. And all I could think of is I would just love to make an omelet right now. Really, really, really. Just, man, I hate that bitch. As we were on our way, I began to notice something about the materials we were working with. They have the ability to adjust the body. This was surprising to me, and I inquired about this. Oh, those, yes. We can make each one stronger or more resilient. But this technology is rarely used, as usually odd mutations happen. Mutations? What are you talking about? Well, you see, we tried doing this on several species, and either they grew extra limbs, or their skin changed color, or they grew extra appendages. It was not very good technology. However, put it on a lower setting, and it heals wounds very, very well. So, in one setting, regeneration, the other setting, mutation. Got it. Yes, you are learning very quickly. Good, human, good. I never did fix her from calling me that. It just kind of stuck. As I was the only one there, it made it easy for them to understand who they were talking to. After about 3 or 4 months, I had completely lost track of time, but I began studying as much as I could about this mutation machine. I wondered what it could do. So, I also used that along with what I found out about that weird biochip they had shoved into my brain, which turned out to be a lot bigger than I thought. Turns out they only put in basically a seed, and eventually it spreads out and maps out the neural links inside your brain. Along with this chip, it also has the ability to link into any type of machine. You just need the right equipment to do so. And thankfully, they did. The only bad part is, the only time you can link in is on the bridge. You can't link in anywhere else. It's a safety mechanism so people don't accidentally open a vent or turn off the engines when they're not supposed to. I could understand that one. I mean, like the man says, there's a million ways to die in space and they all suck. However, as things were going along, I still inquired about all this. But what really was surprising was the fact that my instructor started getting closer and closer as we were studying together. She seemed to like the fact that I didn't stink anymore, for one, and then she started rubbing her hand down my arm, down my back. I kept asking her what she was doing, and she would always give, just inspecting. Just inspecting, you're creeping me out. At least that's what I thought. I wasn't going to say anything. When we finally got close to our home port, at least their home port, we got an alert that we were close by and for everyone to be ready. When this happened, the doctor strayed away from me, grabbed the collar that I was wearing on the first day, handed it back, and told me to put it back on. I asked why. Well, you see, you're going to be meeting up with the master, and the master doesn't like slaves without collars around. It makes her nervous. Her? Well, I don't know if you call her. They're of the Zendai species, and they're hermaphroditic, I know. So, okay, whatever. We'll see how this goes. When we finally made it there, I began to look up any type of information on the species. However, to my utter dismay, there wasn't much. There really wasn't much about the species at all. All I knew was they were considered a large, dangerous species. Okay. I was eventually led out with a bunch of cargo containers onto the docks. And as I was let out, immediately a bunch of aliens ran up, grabbed my arms, slung them in front of me, and started slapping cuffs on me. Well, what passes as cuffs anyway. These very large, bulky, seemingly metal pieces of whatever in the hell they were. I don't even know what type of... I don't want to call it steel, because I don't even know what it was. They then grabbed me by each arm and began to walk me forward. The doc protested, of course, saying, be careful, don't damage it. Thanks a lot, lady. Eventually, they led me to a very, very large building. I figured since this building was on the center of town, this has got to be where the big boss sits. As they brought me into the main room to present me in front of their master, I almost busted out laughing my butt off. I am chuckling so hard they must have thought it was a nervous tick. They all looked at me strange, and I'm looking up at what looks like almost a female version of Jabba. Yeah, that Jabba. The only difference was the tail was a little bit longer, it was a little bit skinnier, the head was actually out of the body itself, and there were 4 very long arms that had 3 different joints on them, 3 different elbows. I'm like, what in the ever-loving shit am I looking at? The strange green cat eyes looked down at me and spoke, so this is what we get paid so much for? Doesn't look like much. I just kind of looked at her, still trying to stifle my laughter at what I'm seeing. Well, we're going to have to test it out to see if this is any good. The doc protested again. But if you damage it, all the training we've done is... Shush, you. You will do as commanded. Yes, master. Now, bring out something this thing to practice with. And with that, they brought forth a creature that stood roughly about chest high, and then another joined it. These kind of looked like, I don't know, trolls, I guess you could say. The eyes damn near covered half of the head. The ears were down on his neck, for crying out loud. Still had 2 arms, but only had 4 fingers. These things were squat and round, each of them holding some strange bludgeon. I'm like, what in the hell am I looking at? Now, each of you will prove your mettle. I looked over at Jabba the Witch right there. I'm like, great, another one of these. As I turned back towards those troll-looking things, one of them turned to the other and seemed to whisper, and then they both moved sideways, one to each side of me. They must have realized, since I have binocular vision, if they got to either side, I could only focus on one. Well, time for my training to kick in. As they began to move sideways on each side, making sure they stayed out of my strike range, I stayed as still as possible, and I waited until they both got to the edge of my peripheral vision. And then I lunged off to the left side, grabbing a hold of the bludgeon and spinning that troll bastard around, holding on to the bludgeon itself, spinning it around like you do when you're kids and you're just trying to lift the other person off the ground. Around and around and around I go, the thing screaming off to the heavens and cursing up a storm as I'm spinning faster and faster and faster. The thing can't weigh 90 pounds. The bludgeon is working as a counterweight, so I'm spinning a whole lot faster. The other one decides to come in to try to slow me down and ends up getting whacked on the side of the face by his buddy's legs. And then his buddy lets go and goes flying off into the wall and lands with a big old thud and then splat as he hits the ground. I take the bludgeon, look at it, drop it on the ground, and go, good enough? The Jabba creature looks up at me, and I swear it must have smiled, or at least its approximation of one. Well, looks like we made a good decision with you. So, it can heal too? Yes, it can. It has been learning very well. Good. Good, then it will do good the next time there is a gladiatorial game. But for right now, send it over to the aid station and have it fix up these 2 idiots. I looked over at the 2 troll creatures, one of which who was just dazed as he was trying to get back onto his feet, but every time he did, he would stagger off to the side. The other one that had hit the wall wasn't moving much and was just groaning. I walked over to the one that was caressing his head, reached out my hand, and it must have thought I was about to hit it as he tried to duck away. No, take my hand, dummy. It looked up at me sideways. It knew I could speak the language, or at least the translator was doing its job. So it reached up and I grabbed its hand and pulled it up onto its feet. He found his feet a few seconds later. Then I walked over to the one that was still on the ground, and I simply picked it up. And this shocked everyone. Even the Jabos. All sorts of crazy gasps were coming through. I'm like, what? See, you can pick that up? One of the creatures asked. Yeah, he doesn't weigh much. So which way to the aid station? I think I broke his ribs. They simply pointed down the hall. The doctor led the way as I put the troll thing down and we began our work. We saved his life, although he wasn't exactly in life-threatening condition. We were able to stabilize him very quickly, and he was on his feet in the next 10 minutes. His buddy, who had just taken a crack to the cranium, was a whole lot easier to deal with. All we had to do was, well, give him an ice pack, basically. He'd be fine in a day. As we finished up, I began to look through the rest of the equipment. The equipment there was far more advanced than what was on the ship, and I started to investigate all of it. That would be my new home for the next 6 months. And during those 6 months, I got almost no downtime at all. Either I was in the aid station fixing some other Xeno up, many times trying to figure out what the hell I'm looking at by the time I start working, or I'm being brought up into different matches or different fights, basically. I guess they want to keep me in fighting shape or just see how strong I actually am. Sometimes I'm facing four-legged creatures, sometimes some sort of avian something, sometimes some sort of lizard something or other. So one time they even brought me in front of the same lizard species as the original mistress. Oh, I enjoyed knocking his block off for sure. I kind of felt bad that I broke his jaw almost off, but that's what happens when you piss one of us off. But when I wasn't fighting, and I wasn't fixing up the people that I did fight, they had me on a bit of a workout regimen. Always moving, always constantly going. And when I slept hard. A few times when I first started to sleep, they thought I was dead. They actually came up and tried to do their version of CPR until I clocked one of them right in the face and just said, let me sleep. When I explained what sleep was, they thought it was some sort of strange hibernation. So they tried to leave me alone for a couple days, didn't understand why I was back on my feet in like 6 or 7 hours. Then it just became a routine. In actuality, it became a game to some of them. Some of the younger ones in that palace decided that they wanted to come up and try to sneak up on me while I was asleep. This is a bad idea to somebody who has PTSD as bad as I do. I could feel the slightest movement of air in that room, and I felt really bad when one of these kids, this avian, kind of looked like a mix between a person, a hawk, and a chihuahua actually, just decided to come up and just get within arm's length. I don't know if he breathed heavy or what, but I reached out and ended up backhanding him right into the wall. And then as I jumped up, I threw myself on top of him and had my arm cocked back as though I was going to crush his head into the ground. And then I came back to reality. I did feel bad and immediately brought him to the aid station. All the Xenos were a little surprised that I was walking around in almost no clothing, as they began to examine me more and more. The doc, every time she saw me with no shirt or no shoes or something, would simply run that strange pawed talon that she has down and simply say, I'm examining. Ugh, lady, you creepy. Normally, my day just starts with a subpar meal after I get some sort of cardio in. I lost a lot of weight because I wasn't eating very good. Then it would be off to work, straight to the aid station, fixing up whoever decided to get drunk and get stupid and do something moronic the previous night. And I do use drunk in quotes here above because they get intoxicated or they get high on very strange substances. I've seen them get totally plastered off a cup of coffee, of all things. One of them actually challenged me once to a drinking game, thinking that I'm going to drink so much I'm going to die of their version of alcohol poisoning. We're doing espresso shots. I'm sitting there doing jumping jacks and push ups and doing dips off the side of the chairs while this guy is falling over and pissing himself drunk. I'm like, well, those are the breaks, pal. Another one tried to tell me that I should be breathing more methane. It'll help me out. Yeah, no. Let's just say no on that one. Seriously, you can always tell when one of those species was around. They always smell like a fart. But once I was done fixing those up, of course, the doc would come in later, as she didn't have to be there as early as me. Next thing I know, I'm heading off to the arena to see what the hell else is next. Of course, I'm being escorted the whole time there, wonderfully. And I try to give small talk to the one who's actually escorting me. Of course, when I get to the arena, there's always people, and I do say that again in quotes, people, the different xenospecies, watching to see what humans can actually do. Sometimes they set me up against something with 4 legs, 6, 8, in some case 14 different appendages. That was an interesting morning. Or they send me up with something that has venom, poison, or something else. Thankfully, they always tell me what I'm facing first. At least my research on finding out the different xenospecies has really helped out on this. I'm able to focus on what parts are going to be the most dangerous and take them out first. Unfortunately, they decided to start aiming towards more one-sided battles, and more of my opponents would be facing me armed. Yeah, this didn't go over well. What I never told anybody is I do actually know how to fight against somebody with a spear. I do actually know how to fight against somebody with a sword. You could say it was a hobby of mine back in the day. But regardless, I always didn't want to put on a show, but I tried to take him down without actually killing him. The proprietor always seemed to like this, sitting there in their slobby form with those extra appendages, always seemingly laugh and just enjoying the show. What I found out later is they were putting bets on how fast the opponent would be subdued and or killed. There was always different bettings going on. I'm like, great. Here I am busting my ass and all I'm doing is making this bitch rich. Oy. Once I subdued them, of course I usually escorted them to the medical bay and then got them fixed up and then they're back and then I get some time off, but then that's some extra exercise. And then I'm studying, and then that night more people decide to get in bar fights and crap like that, and I'm treating them, and maybe I'll get to sleep later on that day. And this just kept going. The only bright spot in the entire thing was the fact that a few of the species started to, well, get closer to me. In particular, the Neldek. Ugh, man, I still can't pronounce that. The Zelendekini, I swear. Ugh, these names are so hard to pronounce. Anyway, we'll just call them the Zels. The Zels are these tiny little troll things, not much bigger than a football, really. At least their kids are about that big. About maybe twice as tall as an American football is long. That's the adults. They have these really long ears. They got this weird, like, yellow, blue, greenish coloring to them. And I realized with dealing with them is they're one of the only species besides us that has hair. I couldn't figure out why for the longest time. And when I inquired, I found out that hair is a sign of a subspecies. The same way we would look at orangutans or general monkeys or something like that. It's a subspecies to them. And then I realized that all the rest of them, either they had scale or feathers or horns or something like that. They didn't have fur or hair. Interesting. No wonder they looked down on us and were so surprised when we kicked everybody's ass before. But anyways, the Zels came to me once because they were hurting. A bunch of them had fallen out of a container and got a little jacked up. And they were surprised. In fact, everybody seemed surprised when I treated them like I would treat a child. The doc even came up and sat there, watching, just staring at the care I showed. Of course I'm going to show care. They're just tiny little things. They're not really stupid. They just don't talk much. They always talk a lot with their eyes, though. Those big eyes would always stare up at you, and I could always tell what they were thinking, whether it be gratitude, anger, confusion. It didn't matter, but I could always tell. I didn't want to let on that I did know. I'm going to keep this one under my hat. But I could almost always tell, after being with these different Xenos, their different ways of conveying their interest, their thoughts through their motions. Non-verbal communication skills seem to be a lost art out here in the stars. But the Zells, they took a shine to me. They would always come up and hug my leg. They would try to climb up my arms and stuff like that. They thought it was fun. They were usually put to work inside some of the smaller areas, usually cleaning things out or making sure wires haven't been damaged by their version of rats. And yes, there are space rats, and they are not friendly things. A lot more slimy than ours. But that's the only thing I want to say about them, aside from saying I call them shit with feet. Along with that, the Zells ended up bringing a few other types of Xenos towards me, other ones that were either shy or just straight up scared. And what truly surprised everyone was the fact that when kids came in, they didn't seem scared of me. They were surprised. Shouldn't children be afraid of the most dangerous creature in the known universe? But the most dangerous creature in the known universe put the Band-Aid on their boo-boos and helped them deal with the pain of doing something silly. Like one of them grabbed a conduit and burned her hand. So of course I had to sit there for a few minutes and rub the nanospottic gel all over her hands until it finally went to work and healed her skin. Or the young boy who, well, poor kid lost his foot. So I had to sit there and comfort him while the tissue replacement machines did what they were supposed to do. The problem with the tissue replacements, and yes, these will definitely grow your limbs back, is you can't use anesthetic at all. The kid was in tears, so I held his hand the whole time, and I gave him a towel to grab a hold of and also to bite down on. I told him he couldn't move, as if he could. That machine holds you right in place. But still, everyone was amazed by this. The doc especially, and she got even more handsy. I didn't have the heart to tell her I knew that her mating cycle was coming up, and I wanted to make myself very, very scarce. However, I didn't get a chance. Suddenly, one morning, as I was patching up the last of the drunk idiots who got themselves in trouble, I was simply summoned to the main conference room. The main room, and there was the Java bitch, and yeah, I still call her that. You will now be the one who makes me the most money. Oh, great. Now what am I gonna do? Before I knew it, I was ushered onto another ship. This time, the gravity seemed to be cranked up to twice what the planetary gravity was, and they just kind of expected me to deal with it. However, I did notice that the only ones that weren't wearing some sort of exosuits were the little bugs moving around. I wondered if this was to wear me out or something. Clearly, they really don't understand human biology too much. The ship didn't stay in transit for very long, and when the doors opened, I knew exactly where I was when I heard the screams of the crowd.